Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the Russian-Ukrainian war. As I speak today, the Russians have launched a series of cruise missile strikes and drone strikes against targets throughout the Ukraine. We understand that those strikes are continuing down towards the south near Mykolaiv and other places as well. It is also reported that a second wave of Russian cruise missile strikes could be anticipated within the next 24 hours as well. The Ukrainians report the shooting down of up to 20 cruise missiles. They report that one civilian has been killed. Now, with that being said, the Ukrainians do not report on military losses. It's highly likely that these cruise missile strikes went after both infrastructure targets inside of Ukraine, but also military targets as well, such as command and control centers, command posts, and what have you, and centers of military production for the Ukrainian military. But again, the likelihood that the Ukrainians would have reported any said successful strike against those targets is unreliable at this point. Now, I want to continue the discussion about the deployment of these Western main battle tanks to Ukraine. There is, I feel, really much ado about nothing at this point. In the mainstream press, and especially in Ukrainian circles, they believe that the deployment of these main battle tanks, these Leopard 2s, Challenger 2s, M1A2s, are going to change what is happening on the battlefield. And that, in all probability, is fairly unlikely, given the amount of tanks that are being handed over to the Ukrainians within the next month or two. That includes 14 Challenger 2 main battle tanks, very good tank. It includes, by the time all Western European countries contribute tanks, we're probably looking at about a battalion set of Leopard 2 tanks. And then 31 American M1A2 Abrams main battle tanks, which will essentially outfit another Ukrainian battalion. So within the next best case scenario, 90 days, maybe more, maybe less, difficult to say, the Ukrainians will field 1 battalion of Leopard 2s, 1 battalion of American Abrams, and a company of Challenger 2 main battle tanks. So you could call that the equivalent of a mechanized brigade with additional armored personnel carriers included that the Ukrainians and other nations would probably supply. Now, would all those tanks be located in one organic fighting unit, a brigade? Probably not. They're probably going to be dispersed into 3 separate units, I would imagine. Difficult to say, though. It would be, I don't foresee the Ukrainians putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. The risk of that brigade being specifically targeted by the Russians would definitely increase. Now, as for the effectiveness of the Abrams, and I'm going to speak specifically to the Abrams. And I've received comments in the comment section asking about, due to the weight of the Abrams, will it get stuck in the black mud of Ukraine? And the answer to that is yes, just like other tanks are getting stuck in the black mud of Ukraine, and they will probably get stuck even more, given the weight of those vehicles. Another question that is coming in the comment section. Do the Russians have the capability of defeating an M1A2 or an M1A1? Yes, absolutely. So the areas on an M1A2, and this is open source information that's been talked about quite often, the frontal aspect, meaning the front of the turret, and to a lesser extent the sides of the turret, but specifically the front of the turret and the front of the hull. In all likelihood, there's very few weapon systems that the Russians have that could penetrate the frontal aspect of an M1A2. Again, front hull, front of the turret. Now, does that mean that tank is going to be okay if it receives a hit to the front of the turret or the front of the hull? No, it doesn't. I would say that if it receives a hit from a 125 millimeter Russian version of a Sabo, yeah, probably it's not going to penetrate, and the crew is barely going to feel it. If it's hit by a Russian heat round, 125 millimeter heat round, that could be a different story. While it may not penetrate the frontal aspect of the tank, it could cause damage to the turret drive system. It could cause damage to optics and cause the vehicle to become non-operational. But again, the likelihood that it will hurt the crew, kill the crew, incredibly unlikely. Again, frontal aspect shot. Now, when you start getting engagements to the top of the tank, the sides of the tank, and the rear of the tank, obviously that becomes a whole different story. The hull of the Abrams, about a quarter of the way from the front to the rear, about a quarter of that are ballistic skirts. These ballistic skirts will stop RPG-7s. I've heard that in testing, naval deck guns were fired against the side skirts, the ballistic skirts of these tanks, and were unable to penetrate. It's very advanced armor that is on those ballistic skirts. There was a case where we had loaded the tank on a train, and one of the ballistic skirts basically came undone. It impacted with something, and it ended up falling and basically breaking open a little bit. And the military was very, very quick to get those ballistic skirts. That armor is classified because, again, it's very high quality composite armor that's in those ballistic skirts. Now, beyond that armor, beyond a quarter of a way down the sides of the vehicle, on the hull, specifically the hull, there's very little armor. There's not a lot. In many of those places, especially the sides of the hull, running from the rear all the way to basically the center of the tank, where the turret would be, the center of the turret, there's not a lot of armor. There's not ballistic skirts. There's just very thin skirts, metal skirts that probably, in all likelihood, wouldn't even stop a 7.62 round. And again, beyond that, you have the hull, you have track, you have torsion bars, road wheels, what have you, that may, cause some deflection or some stoppage of penetration prior to hitting the actual hull of the tank. But the likelihood that even say a BMP-2 firing 30 millimeter AP could penetrate the rear hull of the M1 Abrams, especially if they were to fire towards the rear right where the battery packs are located. That's definitely, even 30 Mike, that's going to mission kill an Abrams. You're going to penetrate the battery compartment, you're going to blow through the batteries, and you're probably going to put that 30 millimeter into the power pack. So essentially the Ukrainians would then have to replace the battery pack, and they would have to replace the power pack as well. So yes, mission killing an Abrams is very likely. The Russians using Kornets on the sides would penetrate, and there were cases in Iraq where RPG-29s were used against the hull, the middle hull of an Abrams, and those achieved penetrations into the turret of an Abrams. Did it kill the entire crew? No, it didn't. It injured or killed the gunner, I believe. But beyond that, yeah, definitely the sides of the Abrams, the rear of the Abrams, would be susceptible to a lot of Russian systems. And then finally, artillery. Russian laser-guided artillery, Russian attack helicopters, all these systems would definitely pose a risk to the Abrams. While the crew survivability is going to be greatly increased, the Russians will still be able to mission kill the Abrams. And then the question is would the Ukrainians be able to retrieve that M1 Abrams prior to the Russians gaining control over it? It's difficult to say. Even mines, and mines have been used quite a bit in this conflict. Mines obviously can penetrate the belly armor of an Abrams. It can blow the track of an Abrams and disable an Abrams. So again, these are not indestructible machines that are being sent to Ukraine. There are a variety of ways where the Russians can defeat these systems. Now, there's been talk about how the Abrams can shoot on the move, and it can. Based on my experience, we didn't move very fast when we were shooting on the move. We would have to slow down. The gun is stabilized. However, the tank gunner is not stabilized. So what I'm trying to say is, as the driver is driving the tank and you hit, you basically uneven ground, you go through ditches and what have you, that you feel that in the turret. You don't feel it as much in the driver's compartment, but in the turret, those guys get rattled around quite a bit. And especially the gunner, while he's trying to shoot the main gun, the main 120 millimeter cannon is stabilized, and whatever the gunner is looking to shoot, he's probably going to be able to hit it while on the move. But again, we don't move that fast, again, unless it's very flat surface on like a roadway or something like that. Then you can move at a higher rate of speed, but you can't go too fast where you're going to hit bumpy roads or bumpy terrain and knock the gunner, knock the tank commander around. There's been a lot of injuries in tanks just because the driver drives too fast, and it just you stop real fast and the tank commander splits his nose open on something hard inside the tank. I mean, the tank is nothing but steel inside. So if you have a poor driver and he is not paying attention to just not what he is feeling, but understanding that those in the turret of the tank feel bumps a lot more than the driver does. The driver is essentially laying down when he's buttoned up. And it's a very comfortable position. It feels a lot like driving a boat. But in the turret, it is completely different. And those guys in the turret, they really feel it. So, again, driving fast, shooting on the move, yeah, it's stabilized. But again, it's only stabilized in a manner in which the gunner is also stabilized and can effectively shoot the gun without getting knocked around inside the turret. But the gunners find ways to kind of brace themselves and do different things. But again, based on my experience, we would come to a slow stop or slow roll to shoot, and then normally when you shoot, the driver would, especially if it was dusty or something, would then speed the tank up to get out of that dust, and then slow down again, fire, speed up again, slow down, and then shoot. And that's being communicated by the tank commander as well. But yes, it is going to help the Ukrainians. Is it going to change the course of the war? Probably not. Could it cause the Russians problems? Yes. Could it give the Ukrainian tankers confidence? Yes. Especially if they receive hits, they're going to realize very quickly it is a much, much safer tank than what they're used to in terms of the T-64 that they've been using. So I hope that elaborates a little more. And please feel free to comment in the comment section. I'll try to answer more questions. Thanks for joining us today. Have a good day.